We're back at Song of the Day here in the Rock Cave. Today is April 8th. We're going back to 1975. 45 years ago, this band put out their third album. It's Aerosmith, and they put out Toys in the Attic. We're going to talk about that album in a minute, but let's talk about Aerosmith's beginning before we get to that. Formed in Boston, most of us in this area know that, 1970. Relentless touring, and it just built up a fan base as they went along. I was reading a little bit about their career before this, and I did find some information out for all you people here in Connecticut that was quite interesting. So anyway, they put out their album, their first album, that had the single Dream On it, which really wasn't that big of a hit. It charted at number 59. So when they toured, soon thereafter, I think they toured 1971. It turns out the very first time they played the song Dream On live was at a place called the Shaboo Inn in Willimantic or Mansfield, Connecticut. I never heard of this place, so I had to look that up. And it turns out that this place was in business for 11 years, and bands like AC/DC, Cheap Trick, Dire Straits, Tom Petty, NRBQ, and the Police played there. So if any of you people ever heard of the Shaboo Inn in Willimantic, I want to hear about it on my comment section, because I do not remember hearing about that at all. So fast forward, they put out this album. Up until that point, they were a great live band, and they just had, really, their albums were just material that they played live. But this album, Toys in the Attic, was their first full album of a lot of original material, and it was a huge success. As a matter of fact, it's their biggest album selling ever. It's even bigger than the 80s stuff they did with Permanent Vacation and Pump. This sold 8 million copies, and everyone loved this album. I mean, it was great. It's my introduction to Aerosmith. I remember hearing it for the first time. I remember playing it a lot, and there's a song on there that didn't get much attention, but the song Uncle Salty brings back memories for me, because that song, I think, is a great song, and I don't even know if anyone plays that. So let's go back to Aerosmith. Huge success. They tour, but basically, if you just need to know a little bit about Aerosmith in the late 70s, it goes like this. Big album, drugs, tour, drugs, more drugs, 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 and then Joe Perry quits. When Joe Perry quits, drugs, more drugs. They try to keep it together, they can't keep it together, and they kind of just pull together a tour, and they keep playing smaller and smaller venues to the point where they kind of just fade out and not much is happening. That brings us to 1984. Some of you who know me know where this is going, but in 1984, Aerosmith reforms with Joe Perry, and they tour with the Back in the Saddle tour, with no new album, just a tour to try to see what happens. That is my first concert, January 5th, 1985, in Worcester, during a snowstorm, general admission, $12.50. Great show, I remember it. I just thought it was awesome, it was great. But the place basically emptied out during the show because of this snowstorm, and as a matter of fact, my ride left early because of the snowstorm, and I had to pick a ride from someone that I ran into from my high school, and that worked out great. But it was just kind of funny that I was like, oh, can you give me a ride home? So that's how that worked out. But that's my first concert, Aerosmith. They would go on, and they kind of took a break after that. That was a moderate success, but nothing big came out of that. They took a little bit of a break. And then, of course, they came back and put out Permanent Vacation and Pump, which were huge successes because of MTV. I'm not a huge fan of those albums. I mean, I feel like it's a different band. They were sober, first of all. The music's good. I have no complaints about it, but I feel like the late 70s Aerosmith is really where it's at. And if you asked me to pick one Aerosmith song that you wanted me to play to demonstrate that, I've played it before. It's the live version of Train Kept A-Rollin' on the Midnight Special, which is basically our song of the day today, because that, to me, when you watch that, it just shows what a rock and roll band looked like in the late 70s. It's a brilliant performance. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Even if you don't know the song, it's a great song, and that is your song of the day. We'll see you again on the flip side. Have a good one.